I'll put a picture up right here. Full disclosure, I had to purchase the rights to use this picture in my video. I don't have blossom end rot in my garden since I've taken these 4 steps to prevent it, and I'm going to share those with you today. Blossom end rot starts as a small brown depression on the bottom of your fruit, and that small brown depression will quickly spread across the bottom of your fruit and rot out the bottom of your fruit. What's causing blossom end rot is the plant's inability to take up enough calcium from the soil to feed the fruit. And you'll notice that I didn't say that the problem is a calcium deficiency in the soil, and that's because 9 times out of 10, or maybe 99 times out of 100, the problem is not a calcium deficiency in your soil. The problem is the plant's inability to take up the calcium that is in your soil and feed the fruits on the plant. So what do we do if we have blossom end rot on the tomatoes in our garden right now? There's bad news and there's good news. And the bad news is we can't reverse any of the damage that's already been done by blossom end rot. So if the fruit is almost ready to pick, go ahead and pick it. You can cut the rotted section off and you could still eat that fruit. Blossom end rot is a calcium deficiency. It's not a viral infection, it's not a bacterial infection, and it won't hurt you. If the fruit is still green and you're starting to see the symptoms of blossom end rot, go ahead, take that fruit off the plant. We don't want to waste any of the calcium that's being brought up from the root system onto fruits that already are showing signs of blossom end rot. These fruits are just going to get worse. So take them off the plant and put them in your compost bin. The good news is you can prevent blossom end rot from coming back on any more tomatoes on that plant. There's 4 key steps that we'll talk about on how to prevent blossom end rot, and let's get right into that. After you've cut that infected fruit off, the first step in making sure that you don't have this happen to any more fruit on your tomato plant is to install a soaker hose system. And the reason for that is the number 1 cause of blossom end rot is uneven watering, or your garden bed or your container going dry, then being filled up again with moisture, then going dry again, then being refilled up with moisture, and just stressing the root system out on this plant. The end result is the plant can't take enough calcium from the soil, and the result is blossom end rot. Step 2 in preventing blossom end rot on your tomatoes. Step 2 is mulch, mulch, mulch. Put mulch on your garden beds. And the reason for this is without mulch on your garden beds, when you water those garden beds, a lot of that water is going to evaporate before it has a chance to soak down into the soil. By putting mulch on your beds, you're going to prevent that water from evaporating. It's going to keep moisture into that soil and going to prevent a situation where the soil dries out before it gets watered again and create that uneven watering problem that causes blossom end rot. Step 3 for preventing blossom end rot is pruning your tomato plants. And the correlation between pruning your tomato plants and blossom end rot is the same purpose of not stressing out your root system. So if we prune the tomato plant, we are going to limit the number of fruits per plant that single root system has to feed, and it's a preventative measure to ensure that that root system is able to take up sufficient calcium to feed all of the fruit on your plant. And don't worry, growing a tomato plant to a single stem or 2 or 3 fruiting stems is going to give you plenty of tomatoes, and more importantly, it's going to give you plenty of beautiful red ripe tomatoes with no blossom end rot on the bottom. And the last step in preventing blossom end rot is not disturbing the soil and potentially damaging the root systems of your plants. If we damage the root systems of our plants, then we risk again stressing the plant out, limiting the amount of calcium that's going to go into those fruits, and bang, blossom end rot. What causes us to go into the soil and damage the soil? Well, one is weeding. If we stick a trowel into that soil to get some weeds out, potentially damage those roots. The way to prevent that, obviously, is just by mulching. Mulching keeps your weed pressure down. It essentially eliminates all the weeds in my beds. The other thing that we might do that might damage the root system of our plant is if we haven't decided before we grow the tomato plant how we're going to hold the tomato plant vertically. We may then drive a stake down into our beds and strap the tomato plant to that stake. That's quite dangerous after the plant has already become established, because chances are if you put that stake close enough to the plant where you can strap it to the plant, you're going to end up damaging the roots of that plant. So it's a good idea, if you're going to use a stake, to go ahead and put that stake in place before you transplant or right at the time of transplanting. Even better than that is putting in a trellis that does not need to be anchored into your soil. I'll put a link down below on how to build a garden trellis that will straddle your raised beds. It won't disturb your soil, it won't disturb the root systems in your soil. It's easy to build and it's super cheap. All of these tips to prevent blossom end rot are centered around the fact that you probably don't have a problem with the calcium levels in your soil. If you really believe that that is the issue, please, before you add anything to your soil with the intent to increase the calcium levels, get a soil test. They're easy to get. All you have to do is go to Google, type in garden soil test, and then the state that you live in. You'll find all the resources there you need to get that garden soil test. It will tell you what your pH is. It will tell you what, if anything, is lacking in your soil. And that way, if you do add something to your soil, you know exactly what the impact is going to be, and you're not going to cause any damage to your soil that it's going to cause problems for the other plants you're growing in your garden. My name is Riley. This is my garden. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. We'd love to have you on the channel.